For years, the U.S. has been flooded with deadly Chinese opioids, and now the tsunami is hitting the rest of the world. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. I want to start by saying thank you to the thousands of you who have signed this petition so far, telling Apple to not block our China Uncensored mobile app. As I said in previous episodes, we submitted our China Uncensored iOS app to Apple on January 24th. We were supposed to hear back with approval or rejection if they wanted us to make some changes within about 5 business days. It's now been 45 days. We still haven't heard back from Apple, and a lot of people are concerned that Apple is soft censoring us by trying to simply ignore our application forever. The last time Apple censored us was in 2017, when they blocked the China Uncensored TV app from Taiwan and Hong Kong. We launched a petition and got nearly 10,000 signatures, along with some great media attention, and then Apple suddenly unblocked our app. They didn't say why they suddenly unblocked our app, but I'm sure they never actually intended to censor us, just a mistake. Totally unrelated to how they're making billions of dollars a year in China. Well, it could be the same thing now, which is why it's so important that you sign this petition. Help us reach our goal of 10,000 signatures. It'll take you just 30 seconds. So join us by putting Apple in its place. There's a link to the petition below. And now on with the show. So when it comes to illegal drugs, the Chinese Communist Party has a zero tolerance policy. No way, no how, no second chances. As a result, Chinese police have launched repeated drug-busting campaigns where they've seized tons of narcotics, arrested thousands of drug dealers and drug users, and captured Chinese drug lords on the run. Wow, they really took the DARE program to heart. People convicted of drug crimes in China are regularly given the death penalty, and that includes foreigners. Okay, maybe a little more extreme than DARE. This war on drugs is so serious that some Chinese police departments have even been training squirrels to sniff out narcotics. But while the Chinese government despises the use of narcotics in China, the hard no to drugs quickly seems to change to an emphatic yes when it comes to exporting narcotics abroad for everyone else to use. This is especially true for the US and fentanyl. But, spoiler alert, there's a new drug in town, and it's everywhere. An investigation launched by a US congressional committee last year found that the Chinese state is subsidizing exports of synthetic opioids like fentanyl. The biggest drug dealer in China is China. So I guess they're going to execute themselves now? These subsidies come in the form of tax rebates and monetary grants for companies that manufacture opioids, as well as the analogs and precursors needed to make them, as long as the companies sell the stuff outside China. Some of these drug producers are even state-owned and have been visited and praised by local officials, despite the fact that they openly engage in selling narcotics that are actually banned under Chinese law. But China has once again vowed to crack down on the production of chemicals used in the making of drugs like fentanyl. It also released a white paper on fentanyl control in the beginning of March, highlighting its rigorous control over synthetic opioids. But words and papers clearly haven't had much of an impact, since China continues to be the world's main source of fentanyl chemicals. Fentanyl overdose is now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. But remember what I said before? It's not just the US anymore, and it's not just fentanyl. There are now alarming signs that the scourge of Chinese narcotics is not just plaguing the US, but spreading to the rest of the world and wreaking havoc. Since 2022, a new lethal synthetic drug known as Kush has been moving like wildfire across West Africa. And no, I don't mean this Kush. Kush has reportedly claimed thousands of lives already, with the death toll spiking to such an extent in some communities that dead bodies have been left unattended in the streets, forcing the authorities to conduct emergency group cremations. Suddenly the term light up that Kush has much, much darker connotations. The situation has become so dire that the governments of Sierra Leone and Liberia have declared a national emergency over the drug use. Chemical tests of Kush revealed last month that around half of the drug, in almost 90% of cases, consists of the synthetic opioid Nazine, while another ingredient appears to be ground-up human remains, at least according to some sources.
As the impact of Africa's worst drug epidemic deepens, disturbing reports have emerged about the newest ingredient, human bones.
Ugh. Now, some Nazine varieties are known to be twice and even 5 times stronger than fentanyl, which itself is 50 times stronger than heroin. How is heroin becoming the safer option? And guess where the vast majority of synthetic Nazines are produced? The drug-busting CCP's China. While the fentanyl epidemic hasn't hit other Western countries like France and the UK as hard as the US, that could start to change in the case of Nazines, according to health experts. In France, a sharp rise in the use of Nazines has led the country's health authorities to raise alerts. In the UK, more than 400 deaths have officially been linked to Nazines over the last year and a half, according to a record level of drug deaths across the country. Contributing to a record level of drug deaths across the country. And those 400 deaths are a certain underestimate due to gaps in forensic and toxicology reporting, according to British experts. In fact, since last year, doctors across the UK have been so concerned about the development that they have criticized the British government for acting too slowly on the growing drug threat from Nazines. The opioid is often used in Europe to spice up heroin, whose availability and purity has declined sharply since 2022. It's reached Australia as well, where the national authorities warned about the fatal consequences of a rise of deadly synthetic opioids, Nazines being chief among them. So with national authorities and experts across the globe sounding the alarm over a flood of synthetic opioids coming from China, why do the Chinese authorities seem to be more than happy to tolerate and even subsidize global drug abuse? Well, some have suggested that it's part of a larger Chinese strategy of using lethal drugs to wage asymmetric warfare against the West. This is mostly based on a book by 2 Chinese military strategists in which drug warfare is discussed as an effective tactic in asymmetric warfare. There are probably elements within the CCP that cheer at the thought of Western rivals weakening due to a China-originated opioid epidemic. Perhaps even as a sort of twisted payback for the millions of Chinese that became addicted to the West's opium in the 19th century, which was made worse by the Western powers at the time, forcing China to remain open to their opium exports. Sure, that was 2 centuries ago, but China treats grudges like they do dissidents. They never let them go. However, the fact that Chinese synthetic opioids are now spreading way beyond the Western world, as well as indications that the Chinese synthetic chemicals industry has been able to grow and adjust organically both with and without state support, suggests that something more is at play here. Economics. You see, much of the Chinese economy has been in the dumps since the COVID pandemic. And in many parts of the country, a roaring return to the high-growth days of the past is not in the cards. So they got into the drug trade to avoid financial ruin, just like Breaking Bad. I'm just not sure if this is art imitating life or life imitating art. But the Chinese central government insists on the economy continuing to grow at around 5% a year, which is a target higher than someone on their synthetic drugs, especially when taking into account that Chinese exports are facing increasingly difficult circumstances abroad, while China's own consumers are opting to save rather than boost economic growth by spending. The CCP has and can continue to lie about their GDP growth, but the truth can only be stretched so far. That puts Chinese officials in the desperate situation of having to somehow find bountiful revenue streams that can quench the central government's thirst for GDP growth. Enter the Chinese chemical industry, which has been the largest of its kind since before fentanyl and other synthetic opioids became a thing. It wouldn't have required much to transition some of the industry's vast manufacturing capacity to the production of synthetic opioids and their precursors, and then watch business boom. But becoming reliant on narcotics exports for economic growth can be a tricky trade. After all, if the Chinese chemical industry ends up having to push out enough synthetic opioids to OD the human species outside of China to reach future growth targets, then who's going to be left to buy all the other exports that the Chinese government also needs the world to buy to grow the Chinese economy? So China maybe should consider slowing down on the drug trafficking. If not for your love of dare, then at least until the Chinese police figure out a way to train these squirrels to also be able to purchase Chinese exports in bulk. And before you click to another video, remember that you could have watched this episode directly through the awesome China Uncensored app on your iPhone, if Apple weren't stonewalling our app. So click below and sign this petition to tell Apple not to censor the China Uncensored app. We need at least 10,000 signatures. The link is below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.